People said the sound of the champagne glass hitting the marble floor was what silenced the entire ballroom, but that wasn't true. It was the look on Claire Whitmore's face after her husband chose another woman in front of 300 guests. The Lancaster Foundation Gala glittered like a palace carved out of gold and crystal, high above downtown Manhattan on the 42nd floor of the Beaumont Tower. Politicians laughed beside billionaires. Waiters moved silently through the crowd carrying trays of champagne beneath chandeliers worth more than most American homes. A string quartet played softly near the windows overlooking the Hudson River, but none of it mattered anymore, because at exactly 9:17 p.m., every eye in the ballroom turned toward Claire Lancaster. 7 months pregnant and dressed in a silver maternity gown that shimmered under the lights, Claire stood frozen beside the grand staircase with one hand protectively resting over her stomach. Her blue eyes looked glossy, not from weakness, but from the terrifying realization that humiliation could arrive quietly, smiling at you from across a ballroom while everyone watched. Across from her stood Vanessa Hale, tall, elegant, and perfectly composed in a black designer dress that looked sharp enough to cut glass. Her manicured fingers curled around Adrian Lancaster's arm possessively, while camera flashes exploded around them from reporters covering the charity event. Adrian did not move away. That was the moment people began whispering. Because Adrian Lancaster was not just another wealthy businessman. He was one of the youngest tech billionaires in America, the polished CEO of Lancaster Global, a man famous for speaking about family values in interviews, while his company's stock climbed higher every quarter. The media called him untouchable. Claire once believed that too. "You really wore white tonight?" Vanessa asked softly, her smile never reaching her eyes. "That's brave." Several guests shifted uncomfortably nearby. Claire tried to keep her breathing steady. The baby moved suddenly beneath her ribs. Reacting to the tension, she fought desperately to hide. "Adrian," Claire said quietly, forcing herself to look at her husband instead of the cameras pointed toward them. "Can we please not do this here?" Adrian adjusted the cuff of his tuxedo without meeting her eyes. Calm, detached, cold enough to make strangers uncomfortable. "You're causing a scene, Claire." The words landed harder than they should have. Around them, conversations died one by one until only the music remained. Claire felt heat crawl up her neck as dozens of wealthy strangers pretended not to stare directly at her collapsing marriage. Vanessa tilted her head sympathetically, the kind of fake sympathy designed to wound deeper than cruelty ever could. "Honestly," she murmured, "I think everyone already knows." Then it happened. A waiter passing nearby clipped the edge of a marble table as someone stepped backward to get a better view. A champagne flute tipped over the edge and shattered against the floor beside Claire's heels with a sharp crack that echoed through the ballroom like a gunshot. Claire flinched instinctively. Her hand tightened over her stomach. The room went silent. Somewhere near the back of the ballroom, a phone camera lifted higher. Adrian finally looked at his wife, but there was no concern in his expression. Only irritation, like she had become a problem that needed to disappear before it damaged his image. Claire swallowed hard as tears threatened to rise, but she refused to let them fall here. Not in front of Vanessa, not in front of the board members, not in front of the cameras. She lifted her chin slowly, trying to hold together the last pieces of dignity she had left. But what Adrian Lancaster didn't know was that someone else had already seen everything. And upstairs in the security room, the cameras were still recording. Claire could still hear the sound of breaking glass long after the ballroom returned to life around her. It followed her as she stepped away from the crowd, past marble columns wrapped in white orchids, past reporters pretending not to stare, past wealthy strangers whispering behind raised champagne flutes. The music resumed slowly, awkwardly, as if the orchestra itself was embarrassed for her. She reached the edge of the ballroom balcony, overlooking Manhattan, and pressed both hands against the cold railing, trying to steady her breathing before the dizziness returned. 30 stories below, the city glowed beneath the rain like a field of shattered diamonds. Normally, Claire loved this view. Adrian had proposed to her 5 years earlier on a rooftop just 3 blocks away. Back then he used to say New York looked beautiful after midnight because the city hid its ugliness in the dark. Tonight she finally understood what he meant. Behind her, laughter erupted somewhere near the ballroom bar. Vanessa's laugh. Sharp, confident, victorious. Claire closed her eyes for a moment as the baby shifted painfully beneath her ribs. Dr. Reynolds had warned her about stress during the third trimester, elevated blood pressure, fatigue, anxiety episodes. But none of those words felt strong enough to describe the hollow ache spreading through her chest now. I figured I would find you out here. Claire turned slowly at the sound of Adrian's voice. He stepped onto the balcony with the effortless confidence of a man who had never truly faced consequences in his life. Rain mist clung lightly to his tuxedo shoulders, and for one dangerous second, he looked exactly like the man she used to love. That almost hurt worse. You embarrassed me in there, he said quietly. Claire stared at him in disbelief. I embarrassed you. Adrian exhaled impatiently and loosened the button on his jacket. Vanessa should not have said those things publicly, but you standing there looking emotional in front of investors did not help. Investors? Not wife. Not mother of his child. Investors. Claire felt something inside her crack silently. Do you even hear yourself anymore? She whispered. Adrian glanced back toward the ballroom, where cameras continued flashing through the glass doors. Everything I built depends on perception, Claire. People watch me constantly. Every headline affects stock prices. Every public appearance matters. Claire laughed once under her breath, but there was no humor in it. So that is what this is about. Your image. Adrian said nothing. The silence answered for him. Rain began tapping softly against the balcony, railing between them. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled across the city skyline. Claire studied the man standing in front of her and suddenly realized something terrifying. Adrian Lancaster was no longer pretending to care. The performance was over. How long? She asked quietly. Adrian's jaw tightened slightly. Do not do this tonight. How long have you been with her? He looked away toward the city. That tiny movement told her everything before he even spoke. About 8 months. Claire physically recoiled as though the number itself had struck her. 8 months. Longer than she had suspected. Long enough to overlap with nursery shopping, ultrasound appointments, baby name conversations, and quiet nights where Adrian still kissed her forehead before bed like a devoted husband. Claire felt sick. Our daughter is due in 9 weeks, she whispered. Adrian remained expressionless. I know. The coldness of his answer frightened her more than anger ever could. Inside the ballroom, applause suddenly erupted for the charity auction beginning on stage. Vanessa appeared briefly through the glass doors laughing beside several board members, perfectly comfortable in a life that once belonged to Claire. Adrian noticed Claire watching her. Vanessa understands the pressure I am under, he said carefully. She understands ambition. Claire looked back at him slowly, her eyes glassy but steady now. No, Adrian, she said softly. She understands opportunity. For the first time all night, his expression darkened slightly. A warning. But before he could respond, a security guard hurried through the ballroom toward the balcony doors, his face tense. Mr. Lancaster, he said carefully. There is someone downstairs asking for Mrs. Lancaster. Adrian frowned immediately. Who? The guard hesitated. Nathan Whitmore. And suddenly Claire's heartbeat changed. The moment Nathan Whitmore's name entered the conversation, the temperature on the balcony seemed to change. Claire felt it instantly. Adrian did too. The security guard shifted awkwardly beside the glass doors as thunder rolled again outside over Manhattan. Adrian straightened slowly, irritation flashing across his face. Why is your brother here? He asked. Claire did not answer right away because the truth was she did not know. Nathan rarely attended charity galas or billionaire fundraisers. Crowded rooms and fake smiles were not his world anymore. After leaving the Navy SEALs 6 years earlier, he built one of the most respected private security firms on the East Coast, the kind hired by diplomats, executives, and foreign investors who trusted danger more than politicians. Nathan Whitmore only showed up when something mattered, or when something was wrong. Send him up, Claire said quietly before Adrian could object. The guard nodded and disappeared back inside. Adrian rubbed his jaw once, already annoyed. I do not need your brother turning this into some dramatic family confrontation. Claire looked at him carefully. You mean like the one you already created? Adrian's eyes narrowed slightly, but before he could answer, movement inside the ballroom caught their attention. Guests near the elevators began stepping aside one by one, conversations lowering into whispers. It happened subtly at first, like a shift in pressure before a storm. Then Nathan appeared. 6'3", dark navy suit. Broad shoulders, calm expression. He moved through the crowd with the controlled stillness of someone trained to notice everything. Unlike the billionaires surrounding him, Nathan did not look polished for cameras. He looked prepared. Several guests recognized him immediately. Claire overheard fragments of whispers spreading through the ballroom behind the music. Former military. Whitmore Security Group. That is Claire's brother. Nathan's eyes found Claire instantly through the crowd. The moment he saw her face, something behind his expression hardened. Not anger. Something colder. More focused. Vanessa appeared near the ballroom entrance holding a champagne flute, curiosity sparkling in her eyes. Well, she said lightly to a nearby board member. This should be entertaining. Nathan stopped a few feet from Claire on the balcony. His gaze dropped briefly to her trembling hands resting protectively over her stomach, then to the redness around her eyes, then to Adrian standing beside her. He took in every detail without asking a single question. Claire, he said quietly. She nearly broke apart hearing her name spoken gently for the first time all night. I am okay, she whispered automatically. Nathan looked at her for another second, and somehow that made lying feel impossible. No, he said calmly. You are not. Adrian exhaled sharply beside them. Nathan, whatever this is, now is not the time. Nathan finally turned toward him. The silence between the two men stretched tight enough to cut through. Adrian Lancaster carried the confidence of inherited power and media influence. Nathan carried something different. The kind of quiet authority that did not need cameras to prove itself. Interesting gala, Nathan said evenly. A lot of people recording tonight. Adrian's expression flickered almost invisibly. What is that supposed to mean? Nathan reached into his suit pocket and removed his phone. He tapped the screen once before holding it up toward Claire instead of Adrian. On the display was a paused security feed from inside the ballroom less than 10 minutes earlier. Claire stared at the image in confusion. Then her stomach dropped. The footage showed Vanessa leaning close to Adrian moments before the champagne glass shattered. Their conversation had no audio, but Vanessa's expression was unmistakable. Calculated. Deliberate. Nathan lowered the phone slowly. My company handles digital surveillance backups for this building, he said calmly. And someone downstairs thought I should see what happened tonight before the footage disappeared. Adrian's face changed instantly. Not guilt. Fear. Tiny. Brief. But real. Claire noticed it because after years of marriage, she knew every version of Adrian Lancaster's silence. Nathan noticed it too. Inside the ballroom, several reporters had started turning their cameras toward the balcony now. Vanessa's smile faded slightly for the first time that evening. Then Nathan looked directly at Adrian and asked the one question that made the billionaire's confidence finally crack. What exactly are you trying so hard to hide? For 3 long seconds, nobody on the balcony spoke. The sounds of the gala continued behind the glass doors, but softer now, distant somehow, as though the entire ballroom had instinctively realized something dangerous was unfolding. Claire could feel it in the silence. So could Adrian. Nathan slipped his phone calmly back into his jacket pocket without breaking eye contact with the billionaire. You are making accusations based on incomplete footage, Adrian said carefully, his polished executive tone returning piece by piece. I would be very careful about how you proceed. Nathan did not react. That sounded more like a threat than a denial. Adrian stepped closer, lowering his voice. You do not understand how quickly misinformation spreads when people want a scandal. One misleading video online could damage billions of dollars in shareholder value. Interesting, Nathan replied evenly. You were worried about the footage before anyone even mentioned releasing it. Claire watched the exchange with growing unease. She had seen Adrian dominate investors, journalists, and competitors for years using the same cold confidence. Tonight it was not working. Nathan remained perfectly still, perfectly controlled, and somehow that seemed to bother Adrian more with every passing second. Through the ballroom windows, Claire noticed more guests openly staring now. Phones lifted discreetly, reporters whispering to one another. Vanessa lingered nearby, pretending to sip champagne while clearly listening to every word. Claire, Adrian said suddenly, turning toward his wife with forced patience, this has already gone too far. You are emotional right now, and your brother is escalating something that should remain private. Emotional. The word hit differently this time. Claire felt the humiliation of the entire evening crashing together at once. The affair, the lies, the public embarrassment. The way Adrian kept speaking about her like she was unstable instead of heartbroken. She opened her mouth to respond, but before she could speak, Vanessa stepped onto the balcony smiling softly. Honestly, Vanessa said lightly, maybe everyone should calm down before this becomes tomorrow morning's headline. Nathan looked at her once. Just once. But Vanessa's smile weakened immediately under the weight of that stare. You must be Vanessa Hale, Nathan said calmly. I have heard quite a bit about you tonight. Vanessa crossed her arms defensively. And I have heard your company enjoys invading people's privacy. Security footage in a public ballroom is not private. Adrian's jaw tightened. Enough. The single word came out sharper than intended. Several nearby guests visibly jumped at the tone. Claire instinctively stepped backward from the tension building around her. Her heel caught slightly against the damp marble near the balcony edge where rain had blown in earlier through the open doors. The movement was small, barely noticeable, but at 7 months pregnant, even a slight loss of balance felt terrifying. Claire reached instinctively for the railing as her body shifted awkwardly sideways. A collective gasp rose from the guests nearest the balcony entrance. Adrian reacted too late. Nathan moved first. One hand caught Claire firmly before she could stumble further, while the other steadied her shoulder with practiced precision. Claire's breathing turned shaky immediately as adrenaline flooded through her chest. The baby kicked hard beneath her ribs. Easy, Nathan said quietly. I have you. The entire ballroom had gone silent again. Somewhere behind the crowd, a camera flash exploded. Then another. Vanessa's face drained of color as several guests began whispering rapidly to one another. To anyone watching from inside, it looked terrible. The billionaire CEO arguing with his visibly pregnant wife moments before she nearly lost her footing at a public gala. Adrian noticed the shift instantly. His expression darkened as he scanned the room, full of witnesses and raised phones. Nobody fell. He snapped sharply toward the crowd. Nothing happened, but it was already too late. Claire could see it spreading across faces in real time. Concern, judgment, suspicion. The carefully crafted image Adrian Lancaster spent years building was cracking in front of everyone who mattered. Nathan slowly removed his hand once Claire steadied herself, but his voice remained cold when he spoke again. Actually, he said, glancing toward the cameras inside the ballroom, something definitely happened tonight. Then a female voice suddenly echoed from the ballroom entrance. Mr. Lancaster? A young assistant stood pale-faced beside the doors, clutching a tablet against her chest. The board is requesting an emergency meeting upstairs. Immediately, Adrian's face changed completely, because whatever was happening now was bigger than gossip. The energy inside the ballroom shifted the moment the words emergency meeting left the assistant's mouth. Claire saw it happen in real time across the faces of Lancaster Global's board members standing near the stage. Nervous glances, tightened jaws, phones lifted beneath tables. One elderly investor abruptly walked away from the auction podium mid-conversation, while another whispered urgently into his earpiece. For the first time that night, Adrian Lancaster did not look in control. He looked cornered. What meeting? Adrian asked sharply. The young assistant swallowed hard. The board received several media alerts regarding footage from the gala. Investors are already calling. Nathan folded his arms calmly beside Claire. That was fast. Adrian shot him a deadly look. You released the video. No, Nathan replied evenly. But somebody inside this building clearly did. Claire's pulse quickened. Around them, reporters near the ballroom entrance were suddenly checking their phones all at once. One anchorwoman from a financial news network whispered something urgently to her cameraman before both turned directly toward Adrian. The giant projection screen behind the charity stage flickered briefly as technicians scrambled near the sound booth. Vanessa stepped closer to Adrian now, her composure beginning to crack around the edges. Tell me this is not serious, she murmured under her breath. Adrian ignored her completely. His eyes stayed locked on Nathan. You think this hurts me? Adrian asked quietly. You have no idea how these people operate. Bad headlines disappear. Money fixes almost everything. Nathan tilted his head slightly. Maybe, but panic spreads faster than money. Claire suddenly noticed movement near the ballroom bar. Several guests were openly leaving now despite the unfinished gala. One investor she recognized from Forbes interviews walked directly past Adrian without acknowledging him. Another refused a handshake entirely. The silence around Adrian had become louder than insults. Then Claire's own phone vibrated in her hand. Unknown number. She almost ignored it until a second message appeared immediately after. Check your email before Adrian does. Claire frowned and opened the inbox with trembling fingers. One unread message waited at the top with no sender name attached. Subject line, hidden accounts. Her stomach tightened instantly. Attached beneath the email were dozens of financial documents. Offshore transfers. Property holdings. Shell corporations linked to Lancaster Global. Claire's breath caught as she scrolled through pages of transactions dated over the last 2 years. Millions of dollars moved quietly between accounts she had never heard of during her marriage. Nathan watched her expression carefully. What is it? Claire looked up slowly, stunned. These are Adrian's financial records. Adrian stepped toward her immediately. Give me the phone. His calm billionaire mask cracked for the first time all evening. Claire instinctively stepped backward beside Nathan. You hid money? She whispered. Adrian lowered his voice instantly when he noticed nearby reporters watching. Claire, you do not understand what you are looking at. Then explain it. He glanced briefly toward the crowd gathering around them. Calculating. Cornered again. Not here. But Claire already understood enough. During months of telling her the company was under pressure. During arguments about expenses. During conversations where Adrian insisted they needed tighter financial planning before the baby arrived. He had been hiding enormous amounts of money. Nathan slowly extended his hand. May I? Claire passed him the phone without hesitation. Nathan scanned several pages silently before his expression hardened almost imperceptibly. Interesting timing, he said calmly. Especially with your company currently under federal review for merger compliance. Adrian's face went pale for half a second. Tiny, brief, but devastating. Nathan noticed it immediately. So did Claire. Federal review? Claire repeated softly. Adrian ran a frustrated hand through his hair as thunder shook the windows overlooking Manhattan again. This is exactly why private matters should stay private, he snapped quietly. People twist narratives before facts are verified. Facts. Claire's voice broke slightly now. You stood beside another woman tonight while lying to me for almost a year. You hid money. You humiliated me in front of your entire company. And now strangers are sending me evidence against my own husband. Adrian's jaw tightened hard enough to show. Lower your voice. Claire stared at him in disbelief. Even now, even after everything, he still cared more about appearances than truth. Behind them, the ballroom projection screen flickered once more. Then suddenly, every conversation in the room stopped. Because Adrian Lancaster's face appeared across the giant screen above the stage beside frozen security footage from less than 20 minutes earlier. And somebody had pressed play. The video began without sound, but it did not need any. Every person in the ballroom understood exactly what they were seeing the second the footage filled the giant screen above the stage. Claire stood frozen near the balcony doors while Vanessa leaned close to Adrian moments before the champagne glass shattered beside Claire's feet. Then the angle shifted to another camera feed from across the ballroom. Clearer. Wider. Impossible to deny. Vanessa's hand brushed deliberately against the passing waiter's tray before the glass tipped toward Claire. Gasps spread instantly through the room. One woman near the front covered her mouth. Several reporters surged closer to the stage, phones already recording the screen from every angle. Adrian's face drained of color as the footage looped again. And again, Vanessa took a horrified step backward. That is not what it looks like, she said quickly, her voice cracking for the first time all night. Nobody answered her, because everyone could see exactly what it looked like. The giant ballroom that once felt untouchably glamorous now felt cold and exposed. Beneath the bright crystal lights, Claire heard whispers exploding through the crowd around her. Deliberate. She did that on purpose. Oh my God, Lancaster Global is finished. One investor muttered something furious before storming toward the exit, while another board member immediately pulled out his phone and began speaking urgently about legal exposure. Nathan remained beside Claire, silent and steady, while Adrian stared at the screen like a man watching his empire catch fire in real time. Turn it off. Adrian snapped suddenly toward the technicians near the stage. Nobody moved. I said turn it off now. But before anyone could respond, the screen changed again. A new file opened automatically. This time it was not video. It was a scanned legal document bearing the Lancaster Global corporate seal. Claire frowned in confusion as lines of text enlarged across the ballroom projection screen for everyone to read. Then her heart stopped. Shareholder majority transfer agreement. Her own name appeared in bold letters beneath the title. Claire Whitmore Lancaster. 51% controlling interest. The ballroom erupted into stunned chaos. Claire physically stared at the screen, unable to breathe. "What is this?" she whispered. Adrian looked genuinely shaken now. More shaken than when the affair footage played. "That document is confidential," he said sharply. Nathan's expression darkened slightly. "Apparently not anymore." Claire's hands trembled as realization hit her piece by piece. 5 years ago, when Adrian's company was collapsing during a major lawsuit, Claire had quietly saved it using a trust fund left by her grandfather. Adrian convinced her to keep the transaction private to protect investor confidence. She remembered signing paperwork in a lawyer's office while Adrian promised they were building a future together. She never reviewed the final ownership documents afterward because she trusted him completely. And now the entire ballroom was learning the truth before she did. Lancaster Global technically belonged to her. Vanessa stared at Adrian in disbelief. "You told me she had nothing." Adrian ignored her completely. "Claire," he said urgently now, stepping closer for the first time without arrogance. "Listen to me carefully. You cannot let this become public." Claire looked at him slowly. "It already is." Another wave of camera flashes exploded across the ballroom. Financial reporters were practically running toward the exits now, desperate to break the story first. Billionaire CEO publicly humiliates pregnant wife who secretly owns majority of company. Claire could almost see tomorrow's headlines forming in the air around them. Adrian lowered his voice immediately, panic finally replacing pride. If this spreads before markets open, the stock could collapse by morning. Nathan folded his arms calmly. "Sounds expensive." Adrian ignored him. His eyes stayed locked desperately on Claire now. "You do not understand how dangerous this is." Claire stared at the man who spent the entire evening treating her like an inconvenience. Suddenly, she realized something profound. Adrian Lancaster was not afraid of losing Vanessa. He was not afraid of gossip. He was afraid because the woman he betrayed had more power than he ever allowed himself to believe. Then the ballroom lights flickered once, twice, and a new voice echoed through the sound system overhead. "Attention Lancaster Global board members," the automated system announced calmly. "Federal investigators have arrived in the building lobby." The announcement hit the ballroom like an earthquake beneath polished marble floors. For one suspended second, nobody moved. Then the room exploded into motion. Board members rushed toward private elevators, clutching phones to their ears. Reporters pushed forward through clusters of stunned donors, while camera flashes burst non-stop beneath the chandeliers. Somewhere near the stage, a champagne tray crashed to the floor as two assistants hurried toward the sound booth, trying to kill the projection feed still displaying Claire's name beside, controlling ownership of Lancaster Global. But it was too late. Everyone had already seen it. Claire stood motionless near the balcony doors while the world around her unraveled. Her pulse thundered inside her ears so loudly, she barely heard Vanessa speaking beside Adrian. "You told me she signed everything away," Vanessa hissed under her breath. "You said she had no involvement in the company." Adrian ignored her completely now. The billionaire who once controlled every room he entered looked trapped between collapsing walls only he could see. Nathan leaned slightly toward Claire without taking his eyes off the ballroom chaos. "Can you walk?" Claire nodded slowly, even though her knees felt weak beneath her. "Good," Nathan said calmly. "Because this place is about to become very ugly." As if summoned by the warning, the ballroom elevator doors opened again. 3 men and 1 woman stepped out wearing dark federal jackets over business attire. The room reacted instantly. Conversation stopped. Several executives physically backed away from Adrian. The lead investigator scanned the ballroom once before walking directly toward the Lancaster Global board members gathered near the stage. Adrian finally moved. "Claire," he said sharply, stepping toward her. "We need to leave now." Nathan blocked him immediately without raising his voice. "She is not going anywhere alone with you." Adrian's composure cracked completely. "Stay out of this." "Too late for that." Claire stared at Adrian carefully. For years she had watched him command billion-dollar negotiations without losing control once. Tonight his hands were trembling slightly. Tiny movements. Barely visible. But real. She realized then that the federal investigators were not a surprise. Adrian had been expecting this possibility long before tonight. The hidden accounts, the offshore transfers, the pressure from investors. None of it started at the gala. The gala simply exposed everything publicly at the worst possible moment. One of the investigators approached the stage microphone while technicians nervously stepped aside. Members of Lancaster Global leadership are requested to remain in the building pending formal interviews. The woman announced clearly. Legal counsel may be present. Panic spread openly now. Several shareholders immediately began shouting questions at board members while reporters surged closer to the stage. Vanessa grabbed Adrian's arm desperately. Tell me they are not investigating us. Adrian pulled away from her instantly. Do not speak unless an attorney tells you to. Claire watched Vanessa's face collapse in real time. The glamorous confidence from earlier was gone completely now. She looked frightened, alone, disposable. Exactly how Claire herself had felt only an hour earlier. The realization hit hard. Adrian did not protect people. He protected usefulness. Nathan's phone buzzed once in his pocket. He checked the screen briefly before handing it to Claire. A financial news alert flashed across every major outlet simultaneously. Lancaster Global stock halted after leaked footage and ownership disclosure. Claire stared at the headline silently. The company Adrian sacrificed everything for was freezing in front of the entire country before midnight. Claire. Adrian's voice sounded different now. Not cold. Not arrogant. Desperate. She looked at him slowly. Please, he said quietly enough that only she could hear. You still control the majority shares. If you speak publicly right now, if you distance yourself from this, maybe we can stabilize things before markets open. Claire blinked in disbelief. Even now, even after betraying her publicly, even after humiliating her, Adrian still saw her as a strategic asset instead of a human being. Nathan noticed the change in her expression immediately. Claire. She looked back at the ballroom filled with cameras, billionaires, investigators, and strangers whispering about her life like entertainment. Then she placed one hand gently over her stomach and straightened her shoulders for the first time all night. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft, calm, dangerous in a way Adrian Lancaster had never heard before. No, she said. Tonight you can finally face this room without hiding behind me. The silence after Claire's answer felt heavier than the chaos surrounding them. Adrian stared at her as though he no longer recognized the woman standing in front of him. For years, Claire Whitmore Lancaster had been quiet, patient, careful with every word in rooms full of powerful men who dismissed kindness as weakness. Tonight, something inside her had changed, and everyone could see it. The ballroom lights reflected off hundreds of raised phones while reporters pushed closer behind velvet ropes, trying to capture every second before security shut the gala down entirely. Federal investigators moved through clusters of executives near the stage, collecting names and directing board members toward private conference rooms upstairs. Somewhere in the distance, sirens echoed faintly through Manhattan streets below the tower. Vanessa stepped backwards slowly from Adrian, as if finally understanding she had attached herself to a collapsing building. Adrian, she whispered nervously, say something. But Adrian's attention never left Claire. You are making a mistake, he said quietly. This company survives because people believe in me. Claire almost smiled at the irony. No, she answered softly. It survived because people believed your lies. The words landed harder than shouting ever could. Several nearby reporters visibly reacted while cameras zoomed tighter toward them. Adrian noticed immediately. His instincts as a public figure remained sharp even during disaster. He lowered his voice again, trying to regain control. Claire, listen carefully. If shareholders panic tomorrow morning, thousands of employees could lose everything. Families, retirement accounts, people who did nothing wrong. Claire looked at him carefully. It was the first honest thing he had said all night. And somehow that made it worse. Because even now he was trying to place the weight of his choices onto her shoulders. Nathan stepped slightly closer beside his sister. Do not do that, he said coldly. Adrian snapped toward him instantly. Stay out of my marriage. Nathan's expression never changed. You ended your marriage long before tonight. The ballroom projection screen suddenly changed again as financial news coverage replaced the leaked footage. Live headlines rolled across the massive display in red letters visible from every corner of the room. Lancaster Global stock expected to open down 40%. Investors demand CEO resignation. Social media erupts over Gala scandal. Claire watched executives physically pale while reading the updates. One board member removed his glasses and rubbed both hands over his face like a man aging 10 years in 10 minutes. Another was already yelling into his phone about emergency legal strategy. The empire Adrian spent years protecting was collapsing faster than anyone thought possible. Then came the final blow. One of the federal investigators approached Adrian directly and handed him an official document in front of the entire ballroom. "Mr. Lancaster," the woman said professionally, "effective immediately, your financial authority within Lancaster Global is temporarily suspended pending investigation." The room inhaled sharply all at once. Adrian looked down at the paper in his hand without speaking. Claire saw it happen then. The exact moment the billionaire realized he no longer controlled the company built around his own name. Vanessa's face turned completely white. "Suspended?" she whispered. Adrian still said nothing. His silence was more terrifying than anger now. Claire expected herself to feel triumphant, vindicated. Instead, she mostly felt tired. Deeply tired in a way that settled into her bones. Because none of this changed the fact that the man she once trusted more than anyone had spent months destroying their life together while she prepared to become a mother. Nathan noticed the exhaustion on her face immediately. "Claire," he said gently, "we should go." She nodded slowly. As they turned toward the ballroom exit, dozens of reporters immediately surged forward shouting questions over one another. "Mrs. Lancaster, did you know you controlled the company? Are you filing for divorce? Did Adrian Lancaster hide assets from shareholders?" Camera flashes exploded so rapidly the ballroom looked like lightning. Claire paused only once before reaching the doors. She turned back toward Adrian standing alone beneath the giant projection screen bearing the collapsing value of his empire. Their eyes met across the ballroom one final time. Adrian looked like a man drowning in front of the entire world. But Claire no longer moved to save him. Rain covered Manhattan before midnight, turning the city streets below Beaumont Tower into rivers of blurred white headlights and reflected neon. By the time Claire stepped through the building lobby beside Nathan, the entire country already knew her name. Giant television screens above the reception desk replayed footage from the gala on a nonstop loop, while financial analysts spoke urgently about Lancaster Global's collapse. Guests exiting the elevators froze when they recognized Claire in person. Some stared with sympathy, others with curiosity. A few lowered their eyes completely, embarrassed by how publicly her pain had become entertainment. Nathan guided her carefully through the lobby crowd with one steady hand near her shoulder, silent and protective without making a scene. Outside, black SUVs lined the curb beneath flashing media lights while reporters shouted questions through the rain. "Mrs. Lancaster, are you taking control of the company? Did Adrian Lancaster commit financial fraud? Will there be criminal charges?" Claire did not answer any of them. She simply held one hand over her stomach and kept walking forward through the storm while cameras followed every step. Nathan opened the rear door of his SUV and waited until Claire settled carefully into the leather seat before closing it against the noise outside. The silence inside the vehicle felt surreal after the chaos upstairs. Rain tapped softly against the windows. Claire leaned her head back and closed her eyes for a moment. She could still hear the ballroom in her mind. The whispers, the cameras, Adrian's voice when he finally realized he was losing everything. Nathan sat across from her quietly studying his younger sister with the same watchful calm he carried overseas during military deployments. "You okay?" he asked softly. Claire let out a tired laugh beneath her breath. "I do not even know what okay means anymore." Nathan nodded once like he understood completely. The SUV pulled away from the curb slowly while reporters chased after it beneath umbrellas and camera lights. Claire watched Beaumont Tower disappear behind sheets of rain through the rear window. Hours earlier, she entered that building believing her marriage was damaged. She left realizing it had already been dead for months. Her phone buzzed again. Another news alert. Lancaster Global Board calls for emergency CEO removal vote. Claire stared at the screen silently before locking the phone without opening the article. Nathan noticed. "You know they are going to ask you to take over temporarily." Claire looked out the window again at the glowing Manhattan skyline sliding past beside the river. "I never wanted any of this." I know. And that was the tragedy of it. Claire never fought for power. She fought for love, for stability, for family. Adrian fought for control until he lost the ability to recognize the difference between loyalty and ownership. The SUV stopped at a red light near Central Park. Across the street, a couple hurried through the rain laughing beneath one umbrella while the city moved around them completely unaware of billion-dollar scandals and broken empires. Claire felt the baby move again beneath her coat. Slow, steady, alive. Tears finally filled her eyes then, not from humiliation anymore, but from relief.